Oh, yes. Hi. We're back. It's working now. Now let's, recap.
Welcome to Handed Satire Sunday, where we attempt to drive a type of person through the coals, but in such a way that doesn't cause us harm, nor subjects our channel to liability, and keeps our families from future incarceration. Are you ready for laughs? Okay, because we all know that things get funnier the more we are told as an audience to get ready for laughs. And laughter is more intense when you add the F's. Okay, go take a piss, then let's begin. There once was, or so you say, a rich man who cared about the future more than the people in his present. Isn't it true that you love the planet more than your family? Yes, it's true that you prioritize the future of humanity over the humans you love right now. Ironic? No. What kind of a man, one might ask, prioritizes a theoretical future over the people who need him in his real life today? We think that perhaps you would like us to laugh at this. Is that it? Are you asking us to laugh at something we should not be laughing at? Do you want us to tell you? Isn't that just so crazy? It's so funny to put the future over the here and now. Oh, is that what you want? Do you find that kind of behavior ironic and amusing? We certainly do. Oh my goodness, we can't believe it. That's just so absurd and ironic that someone could love the future more than the people right in front of them. It must be so funny to choose strangers over loved ones. Oh, you are killing us. We are dying with laughter here at how you put the planet's children over those children of your loved ones that you have here and right now. We hope that one day the joke is on us that our descendants will be as smart and wonderful and powerful as ours must be. They must be super duper amazing if you believe that you could somehow make sure that they would inherit a much better Earth from us. But what if it doesn't happen like that? How tragic it must be for someone who puts tomorrow above the needs of the people in their own lives. Isn't it true that those you love and who need your support most are people who cannot provide you an immediate return, unlike an abstract concept like the future? I know the idea of putting something more intangible in front of physical loved ones sounds so silly. We can see how someone might feel foolish if they put the needs of tomorrow over today and their loved ones. So we will take you up on your invitation to laugh and giggle at such an irony. But there was something you wanted out of this, wasn't there? Because that's how it works, isn't it? You aren't here simply to share a great laugh with your fellow man. This was done for profit, and you knew we'd laugh so that we would see you as funny and lovable. We all know this isn't really the whole story, do we? It turns out it is a lot less amusing when you discover your tech guru's secret past as a Nazi scientist or realize Amazon treats warehouse workers like disposable robots. Suddenly, long-termism isn't funny when Elon Musk ignores his employees and drives them into a dangerous work environment. And we sure stop giggling when Apple fails to warn users of their device's ability to crack an open skull. Oh, shoot. We seem to have had some technical difficulties with our broadcast. Our apologies to anyone who may have been offended by this. But then again, that is the reason we are all here, isn't it? To be offended by the truth. But now is not the time to laugh at long-termism. Now is the time to consider the implications of this worldview. Do you really think it's okay to spend the lives of your neighbors and loved ones in order to preserve the planet? If so, you are already in a position of power to do that. So what's stopping you? What is stopping you from doing this right now? The reason is that you can't bring yourself to do that, can you? And that is because you care about the people you know, love, and depend on, and you know that they need you right now. If you think it's acceptable to let people die right now in order to prevent future harm, then you must have a rationalization system to cover up what you're doing. You must be able to say to yourself, it's not my fault. You must be able to tell yourself that you didn't choose to cause these deaths, that you don't control the resources that would help people right now, and that you cannot be held responsible for what is happening. You must be able to say, I am not the one who did this. Or else you wouldn't be able to look in the mirror each day. What if your neighbor or relative needed your help to pay the rent this month? Would you say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I must preserve the planet for future generations? What if you saw a person starving on the street? Would you say, sorry, I can't help you right now? But if we make sacrifices now, it will save us from future famines. If your friend needed you to help them get through a bad divorce, would you say, sorry, you'll have to manage on your own? We need to sacrifice now so that we can have a better planet for everyone. And if your grandchild was struggling with mental illness, would you say, I am sorry, but we cannot afford to help you right now? You will have to work it out on your own. But if we don't make sacrifices now, our future grandchildren will have a better chance of dealing with their mental health. Of course, you would not, because you care about the people around you more than the idea of the future. You may believe that there are times to put others before yourself, but you still have a strong sense of empathy and care for others. This is why you need to ask yourself what you are really doing by supporting a system that tells you that the people around you do not matter as much as an abstract idea of the future. If you think it is okay to let people die to preserve the planet, then you need to ask yourself why you are willing to do this. Is it because you have decided that their lives are worth less than your idea of a better future? Do you really think that you are so smart that you can predict the future? Because if you do, then you are being arrogant. You are telling yourself that you know how to save humanity in the future when you don't have any experience with that. You are saying that you are better than everyone who has come before you at figuring out how to deal with problems that have never been faced before. And if you do think you know how to save humanity in the future, then you are being foolish, because you are ignoring the fact that no one knows what the future will bring. The only thing we can do is to try our best to make sure that we leave a better world for those who come after us. We can't guarantee that we will succeed, but we can at least try. And if you think that it is okay to let people die now in order to save the planet for future generations, then you are being cruel, because you are telling yourself that their lives are not as important as your idea of a better future. You are saying that you are willing to sacrifice their lives for your idea of a better world. And if you do think it is okay to let people die now in order to save the planet for future generations, then you are being selfish, because you are putting your own ideas of the future ahead of the lives of those who are suffering right now. You are telling yourself that your ideas of a better world are more important than the lives of the people who are suffering right now. So if you think it is okay to let people die now in order to save the planet for future generations, then you need to ask yourself why you are willing to do this. Do you really think that you are so smart that you can predict the future? Do you really think that you are better than everyone who has come before you at figuring out how to deal with problems that have never been faced before? Do you really think that you are willing to sacrifice the lives of those who are suffering right now for your idea of a better world? Because if you do, then you are being arrogant. You're telling yourself that you know how to save humanity in the future when you don't have any experience with that. You are saying that you are better than everyone who has come before you at figuring out how to deal with problems that have never been faced before. And you are telling yourself that you are willing to sacrifice the lives of those who are suffering right now for your idea of a better world. If you think it is okay to let people die now in order to save the planet for future generations, then you need to ask yourself why you are willing to do
This
this.
all bears repeating, you know.
Are you really smart enough to predict the future? Are you really better than everyone who has come before you at figuring out how to deal with problems that have never been faced before?
So you're trying really hard to forget.
Are you really willing to sacrifice the lives of those who are suffering right now for your idea of a better world?
What's he saying?
If you want to support a long-term, slow-growth solution to climate change and human overpopulation,
what are they saying?
but don't pretend that we need to trade some people off today for a future benefit in order to justify the choice. You need to ask yourself what you are really doing by supporting a system that tells you that the people around you do not matter as much as an abstract idea of the future. Do you really think it's acceptable to let people die right now in order to prevent future harm? Can you answer all the above? Because if you can, then you know it's okay to let people die, right? You must think that it's okay to sacrifice the needs of your neighbors for your idea of the future. Because you must be willing to make that decision every day, don't you? And if you are willing to do that, then you need to ask yourself why you are willing to do that. Because if you think it is okay to let people die in order to preserve the planet for future generations, then you need to ask yourself why you are willing to do that. You can make an honest case for long-termism, but not the version they told you to adopt. Long-termism is the belief that some problems are too big and hard for us to solve, which we must work on long-term over multiple generations. They include solving climate change, ending war, preventing nuclear wars, curing cancer, avoiding global economic collapse, achieving space colonization, and ending human poverty. So long-termist solutions try to maximize the benefits from each action while minimizing the harm. Some of these goals may seem impossible right now, but history has shown that they are achievable over enough time, so it is still worthwhile trying. The most commonly accepted solution for climate change is a reduction in pollution to limit its impact on our planet. And some of the other goals could be achieved through cooperation or international legislation, while others are currently under research. Long-termism has had many different names, including future orientation, cosmism, sustainability, environmental sustainability, environmental stewardship, planetary ethics, and universal ecology. Long-range planning means taking an overall perspective on problems rather than focusing on immediate concerns, which could be detrimental in the long run if ignored now. It can also apply to things other than environmental concerns, such as health and education policy, where there needs to be an understanding of costs and benefits across different time periods. However, the use of the term long-term suggests something going beyond one generation or even two and therefore requires much more thought. Many people think we are already on the brink of destruction, thus they advocate immediate actions to prevent catastrophe by any means necessary. So even if the short-term solutions produce more damage than the long-termist solutions, long-termism does not support immediate action, but instead focuses on maximizing benefits over multiple generations without harming other species of the ecosystem. However, this means that we must choose between long-term benefits, which include preserving the earth, and short-term benefits such as maintaining the current economy and standard of living. If you believe in both environmental protection and prosperity over several generations, then you'd better support actions that maximize those benefits, not only your own prosperity, but also ours. You're probably wondering how someone can support an environmental policy if they are in favor of prosperity over several generations. After all, prosperity requires natural resources that may be used up over time. But if the environment is preserved, then we can continue harvesting natural resources. In addition, preserving natural resources provides multiple benefits over time because they can be used over multiple generations, making them more valuable than simply producing short-term wealth now. Examine the overlaps with the Haudenosaunee concept of making no choice without considering how it will affect things up to 7 generations in the future. That sounds like a noble idea. If the Haudenosaunee were here with us, what advice might they give to those seeking to make decisions today that would affect their children's future generations? A simple rule of thumb they might have passed on is, think about what you are doing long term and make sure you're not making choices that will have negative impacts on future generations. This concept of making no choice without considering how it will affect things up to 7 generations in the future suggests a lot of care and responsibility when deciding. The Haudenosaunee emissaries have arrived. Receive them and make them comfortable. It's time to begin our meeting. Thank you for coming on behalf of the Haudenosaunee. Before we start, can we have some introductions? Can you provide a brief introduction of yourself and a short description of the Haudenosaunee people and their concept of making no choice without considering how it will affect things up to 7 generations in the future? We would love to learn more about your tribe's history and values. We appreciate you are here to speak for your community and will consider your perspective thoughtfully. Perform a land acknowledgement, acknowledging that this show is happening in Brooklyn. Let us acknowledge that we are gathering on Haudenosaunee land in Brooklyn. We thank the ancestors who made this land their home, and we pay tribute to their memory. Let us also acknowledge the landlords, police, and city officials who have profited from their exploitation of these lands. We're here to listen, learn, and share in dialogue to seek common ground and make better decisions for future generations. Let us strive to uphold this commitment to making decisions that consider the long-term effects on our community. The Haudenosaunee are part of the Six Nations Confederacy that includes Mohawk, Onondaga, Seneca, Wanada, Cayuga, and Tuscarora peoples. The Haudenosaunee concept of making no choice without considering how it will affect things up to 7 generations in the future was an important aspect of their decision-making process. By considering how a decision would affect their entire community 7 generations in the future, they were able to avoid short-term conflicts and ensure that their choices were considered in the context of the whole. The Haudenosaunee also placed a high value on community well-being, which was reflected in their approach to making decisions. Rather than focusing solely on individual interests or gains, they prioritized the needs of their community as a whole. This is reflected in the 7-point prophecy, which outlines 7 conditions for peace and harmony: respect, peace, sobriety, love, honor, justice, and truth. These values guide the way they make decisions today. The Haudenosaunee way of life is based on these principles, as is evident in their commitment to peace, respect, and the environment. Their way of life is reflected in many other communities across North America today who are also committed to living sustainably and taking care of our Mother Earth. In their efforts to preserve their culture and traditions, they have faced many challenges such as colonization and oppression by dominant groups. Despite these hardships, the Haudenosaunee have continued to thrive thanks to the strong community bonds. Their resilience demonstrates the importance of looking towards the long term while not neglecting current needs or forgetting past accomplishments. The Haudenosaunee commitment to the 7-point prophecy is reflected in their approach to decision-making and their dedication to protecting the environment. By remembering past mistakes, working together, about taking time to listen, understanding everyone's needs before acting, and being honest about what works best for all parties involved. The Hodnosny ensure that they are always acting in the best interest of their community. We have been honored by this invitation to be your guests at this Council of Nations in solidarity with all peoples who believe in a just world of peace, equality, and cooperation among all living beings, including Mother Earth. To this end, I would like to extend an invitation to participate in our annual World Peoples Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth, which takes place every year on September 20-21 in Cochabamba, Bolivia. The World Peoples Conference is a space where participants can discuss alternatives for a just solution to climate change from local perspectives across 5 continents. Our aim is to share knowledge about climate change adaptation and mitigation from communities in the global south which have developed models for living within sustainable limits and protecting Mother Earth. We also strive to learn from people around the world who are taking action at the local level to confront systemic injustice, address ecological destruction caused by neoliberalism, and promote an eco-social, democratic, and just society that respects all life, both human and non-human. This type of dialogue brings us closer to developing a global plan of action for climate justice. Thank you for your consideration. We look forward to hearing from you. A letter from the editor. Dear friend and loved one, I'm very sorry you didn't find this book to be very funny. Some of the other reviewers certainly did. But maybe you will take some small comfort knowing it was written almost entirely between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. over the last 2 weeks by a guy who has been going through some serious shit. There's actually quite a lot to say about why this is hilarious and, more importantly, how and what you need to do with this text after reading. Let me explain. First, the fact that this book isn't hilarious is really important because there have been a lot of bad attempts at parody in the world recently. You probably think I'm talking about the ironic memes which are made specifically with the sole purpose of being unironic or ironic or whatever. That's fine and all, I suppose. They don't really make much sense to me, but then again, I am pretty bad at interpreting most media formats, including this one, so my opinion doesn't really count for anything.
You're an
And
editor.
besides, it is only fitting that there be satire, given what is happening to our world, right? That seems like something everyone should understand. This is because we live in a world where there are 2 sides to everything. There's always a dark side that people know about, but don't dare mention or talk about because it might make someone mad who has power over us. And then there is another light side that everyone tries so hard to reach but fails to find because no one knows exactly what they're looking for anymore. It feels like you can see yourself from either direction if you just squint a little bit, doesn't it?
The editor explains why, even though he's pretty bad at determining the most media formats, he is nonetheless still an editor. I want to know too.
The editor explains why even though he is pretty bad at interpreting most media formats, he is nonetheless still an editor. I am a terrible writer who cannot hold a single thought long enough to finish a complete sentence and who would rather watch Netflix than write another word on a Friday night. This is my first time publishing anything I have written, and I apologize for the errors and grammatical errors that I am sure are abundant throughout the text. So yeah, just a friendly reminder that this parody book is actually not really about making a serious statement or commentary on anything. It's just a joke or satirical reference to long-termism and the belief that a better future depends on making decisions now that will not only preserve our world for generations to come, but also prevent our descendants from living under the shadow of our ignorance and stupidity. And while we're at it, I hope this book was entertaining and humorous. I tried to take a lighter approach to writing it so that it would be enjoyable to read, rather than boring and dense. But since it was written between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m., there may have been some inaccuracies or misinterpretations that occurred. I apologize for those errors, as I am trying to improve my ability to express my ideas in a concise and understandable manner. Please send me an email, contact at Kirkmurday. Come with any feedback you might have. Best wishes, Kirkmurday, who will hopefully be more awake soon. Kirkmurday. This is just a letter from the editor, but I think it still stands as valid criticism of this book in its own right. It's also worth noting that we've been told by several publishers not to bother reviewing self-published books because the bar is too low and it doesn't make us any money. They've been right in every case we have personally tested so far. So if this book isn't good, it will continue to be a bad experience for future readers and reviewers who want to see if they can sell this work in case it turns out well in the end, which has caused considerable damage to our business and credibility as a result of repeated false reporting on the site over the past 2 years, leading to thousands of dollars being wasted on books by unknown authors. If the writing is not of sufficient quality, why would we bother reviewing a self-published book? Kirkmurday pops 3 more instant release Adderall and responds to the letter. It is 1:38. Again, thank you for taking the time to contact us after reading this book. Your feedback is appreciated and will be considered before any further review is attempted. Additionally, I would like to note that we only review published books on this site, so please refrain from sending self-published works for review in the future. This book is an exception since it was written by an established writer and edited by a professional. In regards to accuracy, there may have been a few errors in this book. I've already addressed this matter and corrected them in the text, so I apologize for any inconvenience caused. However, your criticism does add some insight to the editing process and highlights potential issues that may need to be addressed before a full publication is released. Thank you for pointing that out. With regard to the style of writing, you may have noticed that it is somewhat unorthodox at times, but is intended to be humorous and ironic, reflecting the current political and social climate of today. But unfortunately, not everyone may appreciate this style. I am sorry if it caused any discomfort. However, if you prefer traditional storytelling styles instead, I will do my best to change that in the future. Please forgive any grammatical errors in the book. I hope this was just an error of translation and nothing more than that. I would appreciate your feedback on this so that I can learn and make adjustments as needed going forward. Thanks again. It's also important for me to clarify one point of view in terms of satire and making fun of those who are taking things too seriously. We are not trying to make fun of long-termism or anyone involved in the philosophy, nor are we mocking their ideals. Instead, our aim is simply to present this topic in a way which allows readers who disagree with the premise to see how ridiculous it appears when presented from a non-religious perspective. Some people might be offended by this approach, but that wasn't our intention either. Our only goal is to present things in a lighthearted way which makes people laugh. That said, if you feel like you don't know who was laughing at the joke in this text, which could include yourself, don't worry about it, just go ahead and have fun. It is important that we are able to look at this issue from multiple perspectives because it allows us all to come away from this experience feeling more knowledgeable about different aspects of it than we had prior to reading it. I'll wrap this up by saying that I really appreciate receiving feedback like this because it helps me become a better writer, which leads to more interesting books being written as a result. And lastly, please send me an email contact at Kirkworday XXX with any questions you have, and if there is anything else we could have done to improve the quality of your reading experience or anything like that. I hope you enjoyed reading this book. Thank you for taking the time to read my letter. Best regards, Kirkworday. This paragraph has no real purpose in this document. I just wanted to share some feedback we have received from customers before going through their reviews of the book. As with every customer review, please remember that your response should always be based on first-hand experience, even if you don't agree with someone's opinion of this book. That doesn't mean it wasn't written honestly. Just as long as we keep things civil and respect each other's individual views here. Thank you again for reading and for contacting us with your thoughts. It is only by hearing from our readers that we can learn about what works, as well as what needs improving before publishing these types of projects into mainstream circulation, i.e. books. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance for contacting us via email if you have any questions or concerns about our product. Continue the summit between the emissary of the Hondanosni and the Silicon Valley tech moguls, with lots of celebrity cameos. I'm sorry that the writing isn't funny to you, and that some things are unclear. Please send me an email at Murday XXX so that we can continue this conversation in private and determine if this review is still necessary. You don't have to be rude or aggressive about your criticism, but if you don't want to communicate with us directly, it will be harder for us to address any concerns you may have about this book. Additionally, if you disagree with our perspective or our writing style, I would strongly urge you to avoid sharing it with others on. Continue the summit between the emissary of the Hondanosni and the Silicon Valley tech moguls, with lots of celebrity cameos. If you don't feel that it is appropriate to share this feedback with other readers, I would urge you to stop sharing it with me. This feedback is unnecessary and distracting, and it reflects poorly on both yourself and me. Instead of using it to further your criticisms, please use it to provide constructive suggestions for me to make my writing more accurate and humorous in the future. Thank you for sharing your opinions with me. Your feedback is valuable, and we appreciate your support. Thank you in advance for contacting me with any other concerns you may have. Continue the summit between the emissary of the Hondanosni and the Silicon Valley tech moguls, with lots of celebrity cameos. Please refrain from posting unnecessary feedback like this in the future, as it only serves to discredit us and undermine our credibility as reviewers. By sharing it here, you are making our job a lot harder and preventing us from focusing on writing more enjoyable material in the future. Again, thank you for your thoughts and suggestions, but please refrain from posting any feedback related to your dissatisfaction with our work or my response to your feedback in the future. That is what private email communications are for. Just do it! Oh, hey, I've just realized that I've made a few mistakes with this post. Please disregard that email I sent you, as it was not related to anything at all, and I'm so sorry for any inconvenience that might have caused. Instead, let's focus on making better books that readers love reading instead of criticizing them for not being funny or coherent enough. Thank you for your feedback. Please donate some time to edit this article. You don't need to worry about replying to my previous message. The summit continues. Thank you for taking the initiative and responding to this feedback directly. Your feedback is very valuable and will definitely be taken into consideration. I have also removed the email from this document as it contains some errors and does not reflect our actual address. Please let me know if you would like me to contact you personally with any edits you make to this article. Additionally, I will ensure that only appropriate and helpful feedback is provided going forward. Let us work together to create better books that people enjoy reading. The temperature raised. The scene between the Haudenosaunee and the Silicon Valley mogul continues. Hi, friend. Thank you for being kind enough to comment on my work today and send us those suggestions you wrote about. Now, let's move on to some interesting questions. If long-termism believes that decisions can influence our future over 7 generations, then shouldn't people make every choice consciously while taking into account everything from its costs, both present and future generated? It goes further. What choices or actions impact the whole world? What responsibilities to the future fall on our shoulders as humans to be aware of the effects our choices and their potential future outcomes have on the rest of Earth and humankind? I want to understand if it is necessary a concern only for people in different ages, but if there exists in everyone a degree of responsibility to consider the wider impacts of our daily decisions. Do I not, in your perception as the Silicon Valley mogul of tech and globalized industries, have a great and immediate effect on all humans across the whole? To what degree will you acknowledge long-range and global implications before you start making any big decisions in life in this context? And on a general level, should people prioritize environmental issues ahead of their own desires/needs, even when they're short on finances, money? The world can survive if someone eats more, but our global warming rate will rise exponentially the world over when it takes too long and too many years go by uninterrupted without the collective doing the things scientists suggest must occur today, or else it's all going to keep getting progressively worse forever. I know from being an economist/scientist type, we should not make these issues secondary, because if we continue thinking they only matter to other species of Earth, that means humans won't care for other species or even other beings such as humans who happen to become non-human over time, like plants, trees, flowers, all living organisms, not only in my lifetime. As long-term investors and long-time thinkers about global environmental impacts are so interested and invested in future generations, why should anyone care more about future generations than present humans, who have done something like what people in China are now seeing with a new environmental policy that allows businesses that pay more than half their workers' wages to continue operating regardless of the rules/facts while also ignoring local laws? It really seems like you might be saying you get less for future generations and do much damage at all in terms on our environment because of your personal gain at others' expenses today. Should it surprise me? I mean, after all, arenas that have a long view to them typically end with a lot more dead humans from things like water poverty and global pandemics that destroy lives. I mean, look no further at how history unfolds to determine this point. Every war had massive collateral damage as its goal while killing as many humans who could not or wanted to escape their fate for something like money they were supposed to have later, or just to kill some guy's brother. It was stupidity. Plain and simple, which cost countless people everything in order for somebody gain a short-term win that was never going to pan out anyway, but at the expense of others who weren't even responsible for its genesis as well. All of us lose. So why do they believe you will stop and make it last when none else seemed to have accomplished or wanted the exact same? Can the solution fix itself without our direct help while leaving me alive? As a person whose personal life revolves much around global financial success / making huge decisions / creative freedom on an individual level where decisions can take days / weeks. Just one single choice, and often I will do it because it helps someone I care, and love survive. My biggest fear is not doing harm today because we were lazy / lost / not doing it. Rather, it be that when future comes knocking, they won't find someone around worth a thing because those that mattered couldn't keep themselves or even a community alive long. And I guess it really comes down. Who would they call and why are we better? It's sad. Don't you all think, or should they expect we'd be like that too if needed? Maybe they know what kind of people run everything? I think you could give me a lot. The long-termist is like, hey, if this were my decision in China to be done, then everyone might be happier tomorrow, even if we end without money to spend. But at least that one guy might make some profit while everyone is miserable under new oppressive policy, which makes things worse than before ever possible, with human dignity being taken away or just killed altogether. How exactly this makes sense, except it was a good idea on the spot to sell some more shit when everyone needed help. The Haudenosaunee responds, weighing the tech mogul's complex balancing of factors. It feels strange speaking of our side of the conversation, particularly to someone such as you, who seems genuinely interested and invested in future generations beyond today. This may sound odd, or at least it was initially strange to me when I first began learning about it. But if I were to give some thoughts on how people view your point of perspective towards the collective whole as it relates to individuals, it goes without saying that your concern comes from the fear that people are acting purely upon their selfish interests, that the individual does not think ahead or worry about long-term environmental outcomes or impacts. For some context, it may help to remember that you, as a CEO or executive at large corporate entities operating over decades of profit with little to none environmental impact reports in the books to support what you're claiming, tend to forget that not everyone comes to that perspective. I think this mindset goes something along these lines. You're not thinking forward. You're not looking out. You see someone who looks forward without concern for the present. They have short-term view / future concerns. As such, some might perceive our own short-term solutions, which might result in harm, with greater significance while ignoring longer times than others, which means future. This has been happening for eons now, though I didn't know till this last semester. How long is this conversation about human impact going to go before I begin realizing how old I've always heard its topic without noticing anything else changing around until we had all been forced to slow down enough to observe the changes that already happened because people took those steps without realizing consequences could occur. If that seems harsh, maybe understand why when I read about this concept / belief structure and also how long it's persisted within societies that didn't see change as necessary, I became upset enough with myself at what might have gone unseen if I'd ignored the warnings or simply didn't know it existed within myself / my community to make decisions regarding their behavior, as the one could never know enough for me to recognize my ignorance and how many others could have overlooked important lessons about being human meant being conscious enough first, though it wasn't obvious from day zero because most do try their best. And if this conversation becomes long, it may start happening for you also at least once, maybe several times even, so that hopefully next time you might find your understanding deeper enough that it's less surprising each step towards it all finally starts making sense at some unknown later future when we are no more. If there exists such a state of awareness after death, so maybe take a deep breath while knowing you are responsible. A few weeks back, when asked whether I would want children or continue working long hours to keep everything up, I had to pause a minute before stating a single reason why this was my personal stance. However, it struck too close when realized I said my preference without actually taking either option off completely, so I suppose that shows us how far I really progressed with learning these life-changing skills from school. I'm sure they meant something totally harmless / innocuous, like when someone who isn't sure yet still can give a specific answer on such sensitive topic, but not in such way to lead people into thinking about themselves or situations involving people like that. Yet in my mind it immediately shifted to reflect someone saying, well, maybe they would know. Why might somebody care? Does it actually make an actual difference besides getting some insight for themselves by watching these moments unfold before eyes, which seem natural in nature, even though we don't think that often unless we watch others' actions carefully enough first, then realize it happens often among those involved? And even worse, when people say these questions, we become less inclined to think about future options that affect their community without them wanting such choices available. It isn't as apparent now because you already understood what I meant when it mattered. You knew I knew exactly which option would lead nowhere fast in terms of my situation, and when asking for clarity, I responded with simple explanation that reflected what kind thoughts lay inside me. I don't see anything other than a decision made because reasons why I cannot bring up more reasons that are meaningful right now do lack information or personal preference, but at least this should provide enough for others, then moved straight past on to next one like there had been an answer given. I guess we all just knew there hadn't. Maybe my reaction to these questions could mean I think people would understand as a fellow being in similar environment where they also know people better than what most think, thus making me more qualified at seeing their own responses even before I asked them anything specific. It only happened once, yet already enough that seems likely now too many future ones follow. And if these questions continue coming up so far, then people might come see me being more experienced than ever expected, which proves me as capable. This may sound strange, but you know as well there was no answer at any particular period where someone else said, "Hey, let me try something. Maybe then everything becomes better." So it's worth sharing just in case some people are reading along and still have issues processing information because things don't occur like they seem. I think these experiences help guide towards better decision/opinion because they help identify different areas that impact lives around me. As well, we have learned, so it must have come down something simple like knowing ourselves, but maybe you might want kids to one time. How weird. How does it make sense though? Or feeling safe while considering how to interact meaningfully during discussions that are necessary. These conversations could end soon if I started saying more often enough which answer I choose rather than avoid topics so people don't get confused why there's no one person out today who's not going anywhere without some guidance if ever happens. But maybe that will change too since so many are asking now that maybe things may become easier to figure it out as things go along until nobody knows for certain why people chose their own options without making sense whatsoever any more than everyone goes on without thinking on things that need addressed, or if one could simply stop themselves short if asked something which is related somehow, and this process helps them understand how these people could feel while making choices themselves that affect many others beyond simple actions/responsibilities they were expected of done/completed prior. I wonder when I start answering this too often what that actually entails. Will that lead anyone else thinking that it would always occur later than today? But why? What would make me change this? Well, first let me remind that some folks like these are rare and often unintentional events/sudden insights that are valuable in ways people never consider until they happen. Secondly, though, maybe someone else might feel differently than I do while considering same things, which may lead them having different results from what initially seems like obvious responses. Because maybe I would answer this differently if asked again after having experienced so much more than I thought possible. Maybe things won't be quite same way every time we ask such question or others come up which sound similar, though perhaps there was reason behind their behavior. But for now, let's hope they continue on like usual as this topic can be rather than becoming something more than mere coincidence just occurring randomly within world until one day comes where everyone feels better/worse than what anyone would guess possible. So maybe don't think of this text as me explaining something profound because you already understood how people think in general terms by simply having interacted with those who might not see these situations through their eyes only. So please feel free, nor if not interested any longer or if reading has become boring, Maybe go back later and read more interesting material rather than bothering over me having been forced myself write this response for everyone else's benefit. Maybe you'll feel better about doing something different that works well in future events if they continue to arise as questions continue coming up which involve your decisions being made without any real reasoning beyond personal preference, without anyone having much control over outcomes either way, so maybe don't worry. I just don't know if these types would be interested hearing it from me either, because as soon as I think someone will finally find some new answers, then I remember. No one knows for certain either why choices they made led them to where they stand. The Haudenosaunee are asked about their perceptions about the concept of theory of mind. Well, to be honest, I've heard of it as well as seen it played out in my life, whether I wanted it or not, and I'd say it's just as real as anything else. A way of understanding others based on experiences and knowledge gained from social interactions with people, animals, and our environment. That said, I do feel it's a very complex concept, and it's hard to fully grasp the significance of its meaning even within our own community. In general terms, however, it's an essential trait for being human, and something that everyone strives towards achieving in some capacity or another. I'm sure you've had a lot of moments in which you could see someone else's perspective and understood why they made certain choices, even if you didn't agree with them. This may not be true for everyone, but I personally think that being able to have those insights helps us better understand ourselves as well as others around us, and therefore, it's very useful for me when engaging in any sort of conversation or dealing with situations. It's a bit like having two separate worlds collide in your brain. The ability to empathize and recognize that we all have different experiences and perceptions, which leads us down various paths at various times, and yet simultaneously having this idea of a whole that makes up humankind, an idea of humanity which exists beyond ourselves but also extends infinitely. At least that's what I get from reading it anyway. So yeah, that might be a little deep, but then again, not many things really are very important nowadays anyways, right? Now you probably want to know why I brought it up in regards with all things long-range / long-term thinking, because obviously these two are closely connected with each other, and it isn't difficult to guess why either. We're faced with issues such as environmental damage that impact us all in our lives. Our choices affect both others' lives as well as future generations. It is only through our individual actions, thoughts, and choices which we may be able to help ensure a future in which both humans and non-humans continue on together in harmony with one another. I know this sounds like an awfully simple statement and a rather obvious observation from today's context, but I think it does bear repeating because it is something very profound. Silicon Valley tech mogul attempts to demonstrate possession of robust theory of mind. And the Haudenosaunee emissary assesses the presence of theory of mind within the tech mogul. You seem very familiar with this idea, and I wonder how long you've been practicing it in your daily life. I don't expect you to admit any more than I have, because I know how tough it can be for people to open up to that sort of stuff. But still, if I might though, I would add that having a solid foundation of theory of mind can help make us better people and give us a better understanding of each other and our various experiences and situations. It's like having a second set of eyes with which to observe the world. And in this case, it seems like you've taken on a unique perspective that most others don't possess or haven't considered before. However, I would also add that there's a potential downside to this concept, namely If you can understand the world as if it were your own, you might also find yourself constantly living in the future or struggling to relate to others, so it's not entirely without risk. Therefore, it's important to balance this concept with compassion and empathy towards others, which means that having a strong understanding of theory of mind does not necessarily guarantee that someone will be able to live with that knowledge fully without consequences on their lives or psyches. There's no getting around that you just can't see every outcome from any single experience. In that regard, I guess it could be viewed as being rather dangerous if that's not too offensive. You may not like hearing it, but I would rather put it out there so that you don't end up getting hurt because you didn't know that being aware of other people's perspectives can actually be detrimental to you. In reality, though, I don't think any person alive has perfect vision all around themselves. Anyway, nobody sees everything perfectly, and we aren't even sure if that's a bad thing anyways, considering the state that humanity currently sits in today. This might actually provide you some comfort, even if not directly, that our awareness might limit us, but it still leads us closer to being good citizens in our society, which helps us to achieve balance as well as progress within our shared lives, regardless of personal experience or knowledge. Now, obviously, we're not supposed to know every little detail about each other's personal lives or the specific details of their life stories. Those aren't very interesting things to talk about most days anyways, unless you have very few social interactions and spend time doing things like reading books or writing papers about obscure topics. We don't all lead lives like that, unfortunately. Even if we knew every detail of each person around us, we would never be satisfied because then we'd start wondering about things like whether people are actually acting as themselves rather than being someone completely different or worse, pretending. For this reason, we'll never get anywhere by focusing solely on these things, which is why I find it a much better approach to focus less on ourselves and our individual experiences alone. The satire ended. Voltaire, having read this submission, assesses the effectiveness of the satire that has just ended. So the question then becomes, where did this satire end and real life begin? This might be difficult to answer in context, but it remains possible that we are witnessing a unique phenomenon in which we can no longer tell whether certain characters portrayed as part of a story are merely fictional representations of humans rather than real human beings. We must therefore take care not to confuse fact with fiction in this context, or else we may end up losing track of what is actually happening around us. A dangerous state of mind for those who wish to remain alert to the world outside. It may also be helpful for readers to understand that satire is merely a way of critiquing reality through humor, and that it should not be taken too seriously beyond this level. With that in mind, it's up to each individual to make their own decision about what works best for them personally, without the need for outside influence. Thank you for reading.